Why were they making you do this just because your parents were out?
So basically, because my parents are suppressive persons, like this is like if you have a suppressive person in your life, you're called a potential trouble source or PTS. In Scientology, they have like an emotional chart, which has like you have to learn the whole thing by heart, verbatim. You have to learn so many things verbatim. You basically have to do these drills, which are quizzes on what everything you learn in here. They're called what do you do drills. Again, the senior most official on the base was doing these drills with me, and then occasionally I was getting interrogated on the e-meter. And this basically went on for months. I was isolated from everybody. I was only allowed to eat at a table with this woman. In order to go to the bathroom, I had to knock on her door and ask her to escort me downstairs because they had key card access to everything. And I was not allowed to answer the phone in case it was my parents calling.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I was raised in a family with 4 moms and 35 kids. We were members of the FLDS Church, which is a polygamous group run by their prophet Warren Jeffs, who is now serving a life sentence in prison.
I was raised mainstream LDS in Utah. Sam and I have been married for 11 years and have 2 awesome kiddos.
Yes, we do. And today we are very excited. We have a special guest with us today. Welcome, Jenna Miscavige. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on.
We are so excited. We've had so many people request, like since the very first video that we did reacting to your interview with Australia 60 Minutes, people are like, you have to get Jenna on, you have to get Jenna on. So we have just been looking forward to this. So excited to get to talk to you and learn more about your story, because 60 Minutes was scratching the surface. And we knew that. We were like, this is like barely anything. We know there's so much more.
Totally. I loved watching your guys' commentary on it and even learning a little bit about you guys. And I remember listening to your intro and being like, wait, did he just say 35 people in
Yeah. Wild,
like,
right?
so nonchalantly, but
Yeah. I say it all the time. I don't even think about what that actually entails anymore because it's so normal to me.
Normal.
Okay, but you want to know something hilarious? So last Saturday, I took our kids to like this little farm down the street, and they got to go like on a pony ride, right? And we're in the barn talking to this lady, meeting her for the first time, and she asks, my mom was with me, and so we were talking about our family, and then they asked our daughter how many siblings your daddy has. And she
That's
goes,
an interesting question.
yeah, because we were talking about how many siblings I had,
okay.
because my mom
Okay.
was there, right? So they're like, oh, I have this many kids. And my mom's like, oh, she's one of 4. And then Lila goes, oh, well, my daddy has a lot of siblings. And this lady looks and is like, oh, really? My daughter goes, how many does he have again, mommy? And I was like, well, he has 12 in his adopted family. And she goes, yeah, but how many in his biological family too? And I was like, 34. And the lady's eyeballs got like super big. I was so confused, but it was so funny because normally we like keep, conversations very simple for people, but our daughter was like, tell him, mom, tell it how it really is.
Totally. I love how the kids break out with the truth. And I totally relate to how, like, when people are just like, oh, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And it's like, well, how do I shorten the response to this? It's like
Yes.
the simplest question can like be so complicated.
Exactly. And I feel you with that because people will ask me, where are you from? And I'm always like, okay, do I keep this the short version, or am I willing to talk for the next 2 hours? And if I'm in a hurry, then I say, oh, I'm from Southern Utah, and move on with my life.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure it's the same for you, Jenna. If you want to keep it short, you just give a very dumbed down answer.
You're at least smart and figured that out. I still feel like I don't have like the elevator pitch, which is insane. I just sit there and like balk, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I say I mostly grew up in California.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so hard to answer those like simple questions.
Yeah.
And when you do say them to strangers, and then like you said, you're like, okay, just buckle up if you want the real answer.
Get ready. Well, we're excited to get into your story, Jenna. And also, just FYI, for people that are wanting to know more about Jenna here, go check her out on both TikTok and YouTube. She has a lot more information over there as well.
Yeah. But we're excited to not have your elevator pitch because we want all the nitty-gritty details.
Yes. And we love to just start out from the beginning and kind of get to know you and what it was like in what your childhood was like. So if you don't mind telling us where you were from, where you were raised, and
Mhm.
just kind of what it was like growing up as a kid.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So just before I was 2 years old, my parents joined Scientology's most dedicated group called the Sea Organization.
Hmm.
And that's basically like a group where they sign billion-year contracts. So in Scientology, they believe that you're a spiritual being and that you live lifetime after lifetime. You're basically immortal, and that every new lifetime you get a new body. And then when that body dies, you get another body. And so basically, you're pledging yourself for the next billions of years every lifetime. And Sea Org members live communally, they work communally, they get paid $50 a week. They work 15-hour days, 7 days a week, and they just have little to no time off, and they get paid like $50 a week. And then, now they're not allowed to have kids at that time. When I feel like right after I came in, the rule was like, no more Sea Org members can have kids.
Now, were your
Hmm.
parents raised in Scientology as well? Is that why, and they're becoming Sea Org members now as like new parents, or did they convert and just dive super deep right from the get go?
So as kids, they were raised in Scientology, like kind of starting out like just like around their teens.
Okay.
And then they basically wound up joining the Sea Org as well, like also in their teens. And
Oh.
Hmm.
they left shortly, like before I was born. They had like sort of like a falling out with Scientology, and then they had me. They were living in the regular world, although the place they were working like was with other Scientologists. So they were still involved, but then they basically got re-recruited back into the Sea Org.
Wow,
Wow.
isn't that kind of rare to get like if they had a falling out, like were they ever declared a suppressive person? Look at me knowing the terminology
Ooh,
now.
SP.
Yeah,
I
were they
know. Look
considered
at
an
you.
SP or were they just like, oh, okay, we're going back to like the civilian or
I think it was like less hardcore at that time,
Hmm.
but
okay.
so they weren't declared because they didn't actually leave Scientology. They just left the Sea Org.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you can leave the Sea Org without leaving all of Scientology. You just basically have to like make amends, pay a bunch of money, and you can still be on good terms.
Why am I not surprised? So, in order to be on good terms, you have to pay. It's just mind blowing to me. But based on what I've heard, it's not surprising. It seems like they're all about the money.
Right. Well, and sort of how they word it so that it doesn't sound as psychotic as that, even though it is they basically when you're on staff or when you're in the Sea Org, you're allowed to take Scientology courses and receive Scientology auditing. That's like their word for counseling, but you get it for free. So
Mm.
when you leave, they give you what's called a freeloader debt. So basically, so that you weren't just joining staff and being a freeloader and receiving all of their auditing and training. Because normally, if you're not on staff, sorry, I guess I should have said this, that like if you're not a staff member or a worker for Scientology, you actually pay like thousands of dollars in order to take a course or in order to get their counseling.
Wow.
I think Claire had sent us hers and it was like when she left they sent her and I was like freeloader, they're like trying to make you back pay for everything that they did for you while you were a Sea Org member. Is that
Exactly,
accurate?
yeah, and they require you to take these courses. They require you to get this counseling, like, it's not even by choice, and you're, like, working your butt off for them endlessly, but they, like, do some, like, brainwashing switcheroo where they're like, "You're a freeloader," when really they're
Yeah.
getting all the free labor.
Yeah, her bill was something like $95,000 or something wild like that, and I was like and it
Yeah.
seems like all the paperwork that I've seen, like the suppressive person report, or it's
Mhm.
all very, like, law-oriented, like, it's all contract at first when I heard billion-year contract, I wasn't actually thinking like, I was thinking more of like a covenant is
Hmm.
what we would call it, right? Where you're making, like,
Mm.
this eternal covenant where you're
Right.
making this promise with God, but there's not like legal paperwork. But it seems like Scientology, everything is like actual paperwork. If you're signing the billion-year contract, it's a physical, literal contract, right?
It is, but I think that's a good point you're making because I think that, in with LDS, it's like they're church forward, where Scientology, to be honest, it's more like they're kind of pretending to be a church and they really think of like the things that they do as legal or I don't know, like logical or more official. They're not even I guess they're like not even sort of bothering to make it sound like it's like a covenant with God. They don't even believe in God.
Yeah.
Mm.
And L. Ron Hubbard was like in the Navy, and the Sea Org started out on like a cruise ship, and they have all these naval traditions. Like workers have ranks and post titles, and there's hierarchies, and we would like salute to each other and
Wow.
do close order drilling. And so I feel like, yeah, that's more the flavor rather than like
Okay.
God or anything more spiritual.
I did have a question about the contracts.
Mhm.
Was there ever anybody who claimed to have come back and like was signing like, oh, I signed my billion-year contract and here I am coming back?
Aside from the South Park episode. No,
Aside from
Aside
L.
from
Ron
not
that,
Hubbard and Tom Cruise's body, besides that.
like I'm sure there has been. There's not somebody who I know of because we don't know. I don't know everyone, but there's like for the Sea Org, there's like this coat of arms, and it has on it like revenimus, or it's like a Latin word which means we come back.
Yeah.
And when you like if somebody who's in the Sea Org passes away, basically they write up this whole like little obituary thing, and they're like, we give you a 20-year leave of absence to, you've dropped your body, but now you can come back, get a new body, grow up and rejoin. So it's like they really think this.
Yeah.
did they ever tell you why 20 years?
No, they didn't. Yeah, and I guess I never really asked. I mean, in Scientology, they believe that when you die, you go to what they call, to be honest, like I think like since I was a kid, I didn't ask as thoroughly about things as I should have, but like they believe that you go to what they call like an implant station, which is like I just imagined it being somewhere in space where basically they erase all your memories and then
Mm.
you get shot back to earth somehow into a baby body. So I guess I figured that maybe the implant station takes 2 of those years, and then it's just enough time for you to grow up in order to be able to be a Sea Org member.
Okay.
Mm.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. But no one ever was like, I'm coming back. This is me back that you know of. Did you ever meet anybody that was like, I had already gotten clear and I'm back to do my second round, to do my second term of my billion-year contract?
Well, the clear thing happens all the time, but not I haven't heard someone saying the Sea Org thing.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so people always say that they are past life clear all the time. That
Interesting.
definitely happens. And even like I mean, I can't tell you how many Scientologists, like, if they, like, have a baby, they're like, "I think that our baby's L. Ron Hubbard."
Really? Oh
Wow.
my
I mean,
word.
if that's all you're living for is to gain this status, I imagine everyone looks up to him as almost like a godlike figure in a way, right?
For sure, that's, like he's the closest thing to God. Like, that really is how he was looked at, but we just didn't call him that, and we didn't pray. But what we did do is, like, his picture was in every room, like, it was even in my dorm room as a
Mm,
kid, and then at the end of the night, when we were done with our studies, they would just say, "3 cheers to LRH," 'cause LRH is short for L. Ron Hubbard, and then
mm.
we'd be clapping, and then they'd go, "Hip, hip," and we'd all go, "Hooray," and we'd do it 3 times, and then yeah. And every
Oh.
Scientology event ended with that.
Okay, so L. Ron Hubbard was getting kind of, again, I just have like our terminology. I'm like, he's kind of getting worshipped. But I mean, Warren Jeff's picture is in like every room of a lot of
Yeah, in
FLDS
the
members.
FLDS Church, the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, yes, Warren
Right.
Jeffs is definitely worshipped in a way. I mean, some people had him on their pillowcases.
Oh my
So
gosh.
they were sleeping
Wow.
with him, which, knowing the man and the things he has done, it
Mm,
just gives me the hibbity-jibbities. I
yeah,
said that wrong
Yes.
probably, but
I liked it.
it's very, very disturbing to think how much people look up to and worship these men that are clearly not perfect,
Or not
Yeah.
even not
Totally.
perfect, but, like,
but are bad in a lot of
inherently,
ways.
yeah,
Yes.
doing evil things. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, totally. Yes. And even like as a kid, having to listen to L. Ron Hubbard drone on and on endlessly about nonsense, I'm like, wow, I can't imagine my kids putting up with that for 1 second. I'm like, how did they get us to do that?
It's crazy, right? When you think about the things that you put up with and the things you were okay with,
Mhm.
it's you would never want someone else to have to once you leave, of course, right? Then you look back and you say, "Wow, I don't know how anyone would do that, and I don't know how I did that." But in the moment, they have us convinced that there is only one way to do this life.
Totally.
So
Yes.
it gets tricky. But let's jump back to your childhood. You said your
Okay.
parents were in the Sea Org, so
From the time you were 2, were you in the cadet program that young, or did they wait? Is there, like, a certain age that you have to get before you're able to go into a cadet program?
I love that you know cadet program. I love that
we
you know
learned
those words.
something.
Uh-huh.
So like my older brother was a cadet and then I was like in the nursery. So it was just like we would go to like this Scientology run by Sea Org members daycare all day and we would like sort of learn our ABCs. And then at first, at the end of the night, we would come back to our parents' apartment and there would be family time. And, you know, we would hang out with our parents for a few hours and then go to sleep. But after about a year, family time got canceled.
Jeez.
And yeah. And then so my dad went up to work at Scientology's International Management Base in Hemet and my mom was on a project in Curacao in the Caribbean renovating Scientology's Free Winds. It's like their cruise ship where they deliver the highest level of Scientology. So she was like getting the fundraising done for this. She was getting the renovations done for it. And so my dad, so basically I would be in the nursery all day and then at the very end of the night they had this other Sea Org member who was not related to me. She would come pick me up at the nursery at like 1 a.m., bring me to my parents' like apartment. She would sleep there with me and then bring me back to the nursery in the morning.
Oh my
Hmm.
word.
Yeah, and then so I would see my dad, yeah, once a week. He would come down on like late Saturday evening, and then he would have to leave again by like 10 a.m. the next morning because he would have to drive all the way. It was like 2 hours away where the international management base was. And yeah, that's pretty much how it was until I turned 6.
Okay.
Oh my
So
word.
up until this point, you turn 6, and you probably have a lot, some memories at this point at age 6, which I'd
Yes.
love to get into those. But
Okay.
so you're up to this point. Your parents are how often? How often did you see them? And do you remember the switch of when they took away family time? Was it a big change in your life?
I remember the moment that I heard about it. I remember a lot. So I remember how we lived was in an apartment. It was a two-bedroom apartment, but another family lived in the other room.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
And then so it was actually Mike and Kathy Rinder with his two kids, Benjamin and Taryn Rinder. And
Oh.
then it was my mom and dad and me and my brother. We had like bunk beds in the living room. And I remember Kathy came and told Benjamin, she was talking to him, me and Benjamin were like best friends. Apparently, I made myself a part of every conversation he was in because I was just standing there. And she said, she was like, yeah, so I'm really sorry, Benjamin, but family time, it's no longer, it's canceled and I'm not going to be able to see you every day. From now on, I'm just going to see you once a week. And he was like crying. And I was like, sucks for him. I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And then I was like, I'm sorry. Like, I like put my arm around him. And then she was like, oh, you too.
Oh
Oh,
my
geez.
word.
Sorry for laughing. But it's just like, so sorry.
No, you're good.
It's just
You
unbelievable.
know what?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
actually happens a lot with us too, where like Sam will laugh at something and people are like, "It's not funny." And it's like, "No, there's things that like
It's a coping mechanism.
if you don't laugh, you're
exactly.
gonna cry, right? Like
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
so sad and it's so absurd and it's so heartbreaking that almost all there is left to do is be like, I can't believe that even happened, and to it ends up laughing. Like we do the same thing, so don't feel bad.
Okay, good. It's just so messed up. And then
Yeah.
so she's like telling me, she's like, "Oh, you too," because I was like, "Oh, poor him," and she's like, "No, you too," but my parents weren't there to tell me, and so that just sort of started happening. And
Mm,
then my mom went up to the international management base too, so they would just drive down once a week, and then that's kind of just how it was for the next few years until I turned 6.
wow.
Wow. Okay. So you're in nursery. Here's a young kid not even seeing your parents at all, basically. What
Yeah.
was your life or your typical day like within the nursery or within that program?
So we would go and, I just remember learning the ABCs, and then we would learn phonics. Like, I think briefly they tried to take us to a public school, but then it went back to just being, like, regular schooling. Um, yeah, and then in the evening, we would just go back to the nursery at the apartment building, and we would all, like, go to sleep. I remember kids giving each other touch assists at that time when we were kids. And so Scientology, they have these things called assists, which are supposed to put basically your spirit back in better communication with your body, which is supposed to help you heal. And
Mm.
it was called a touch assist. And like we would just give that to each other. And it's hard to demonstrate with just myself, but like,
Were you giving this assist as a way to help others be happy? Like, were you sad in that moment, or what was the purpose for the assisting?
it didn't really address like happiness or sadness. It was more, to be honest, I think that we did it to go to sleep, but it
Mm.
was just like supposed to, but in general in Scientology, it's just meant to be like if you're sick or if you're not feeling well, it helps like your spirit be in better communication with your body.
So it
Ah,
sounds like that it was similar to a priesthood blessing in the Mormonism churches, just
yeah.
as a way to heal, except for they don't believe in God. Therefore, it wasn't the blessing from God. It was uh,
Mm.
assisting each other and helping in more scientific way, right?
But kids were doing that to each other?
Yes. Yeah, we were doing it to each other. I mean, I can show you. I have like a teddy bear. No questions about why I have a teddy bear.
Nope, we don't have any questions about that. That makes
Okay.
perfect sense to me.
Except now I just realized that I have to do his voice too. That's going to be
Oh,
awkward.
oh
He's
Okay.
so
yes.
cute though.
Thank you. Okay, so we would basically just be like, well, actually, we'd be laying down, like on a bed. So,
Uh-huh.
and then we would just do it like symmetrically. Like we'd go, feel my finger. And then he'd be like, yeah. Be like, thank you. Feel my finger? Yeah. Thank you. Feel my finger? Yeah. And by the way, your eyes are closed. And then you just like do that all the so basically I guess you're getting the spirit to put their attention on that part of the body, and it makes them more better in touch with the body because you believe you are a spirit and that your body's a piece of meat that you're
Mm.
just like controlling, and that likes to eat and sleep. So
Wow, that is so
That's
interesting.
really
Was
interesting.
this a daily thing that you would do?
yeah, we would do it every night before we went to sleep. And like you even like touch each finger and each toe symmetrically, and then you like ask them to turn over, and then you're like, "Turn over, please." And then you're like, "Feel my finger." "Yes, thank you." "Feel my finger." You had to acknowledge after each time they say yes.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And like and but the thing is that in order to end any kind of assist, they have to have like some kind of realization or say like, "I feel better. I feel more in touch with my body." So basically people would just say that in order to be like, "Okay, can this be over now? I'm ready to go to sleep."
Can this be over
Yeah.
now?
With
Yeah.
Wow.
with kids administering to each other, and then I'm guessing, did adults ever do it as well?
Like, I did it as an adult on other adults. Yeah, and sometimes an adult would give me a touch assist, but, like, at that time, it was probably just, like, to keep us busy.
Okay. I
Hmm.
worry, and maybe we're just in the realm of horrible things always happening to children, but did that lead to like inappropriate touching or abuse? Because that would make me nervous if people were doing that to children, like a touch assist, and then could normalize inappropriate touching.
I do think that it does normalize inappropriate touching. I think many things in Scientology normalize sexual harassment, they normalize inappropriate touching. But that was in this case, like, I do think that there were things going on, but like that was all in an open room. We all were like on cots
Oh,
laying there at that time. So maybe that wasn't a big deal that I was aware of at that time at that moment.
oh, that's good. That makes my heart feel a little
Yeah.
happier.
So at this young age,
Mhm.
did your last name Miscavige have anything to did it really mean much at this time?
No, like, at that time, I was not aware of it, but, I mean, I think it did, but I was
Okay.
completely clueless. Like, I actually remember the moment when one of my friends told me that my uncle was, like, the boss of all Scientology. I
Mhm.
remember as a kid, even at this young state, going so Scientology has, like, 6 or so, like, big events each year where all Scientologists like get dressed up in like ball gowns and like suits. And like we would go at that time to the Shrine Auditorium. And then like Scientology executives, like my uncle and even my dad, sometimes they would talk in front of everybody and like present all this stuff and say how great Scientology was. And so I remember going to those events with my nanny and being like, Uncle Dave, and being like, Daddy. And then my dad after would be like, I waved to you with my pinky. I don't know if you saw me. But that's what I remember. I thought, as far as I was concerned, everybody's dad did that. Like, or
Oh, wow.
everybody's
Okay.
uncle. I had no idea
So there wasn't
whatsoever.
any like preferential treatment towards you specifically for being a miscavige or for being
Well, I think if there was, it would have come later, and
oh,
or I would have only been aware of it later because I was just so little at this point
Mhm.
that I wouldn't even known that I was getting preferential treatment because I didn't even know if my so I guess on some level, like, me even having a nanny who would pick me up at 1 a.m. is something that other kids didn't have, like, but other kids also had their parents there who worked in
Mhm.
LA, so their parents
mm,
would pick them up. So maybe if another kid had 2 parents that were away, nobody picked them up, but really, for the most part, everyone else who I knew had their parents picking them up. But I
oh,
do think that, like, my mom was able to organize that I had a nanny who picked me up at 1 a.m. and brought me back to school at 8 a.m. It's an
Mhm.
amazing privilege
oh
that,
goodness. Oh goodness.
Wow.
but,
Mm,
so yeah, like, just something like that, like, maybe another Sea Org member wouldn't have been able to organize that, and she was able to, but it didn't really work out as some big, great privilege to me because my parents were gone.
So,
gotcha.
something that I don't think we've asked anyone to this point, were you able to have fun? Like, hey, go play, go do whatever you want to do for a couple hours.
Right. So, I would say that before I was 6 years old, there were moments of that, like, we would we would at least be able to play around in the nursery and like, I had like a doll in my parents' apartment that I could play with. Like one morning a week we were supposed to be cleaning the apartment and then I could like play with my dolls or whatever. But after I turned 6, really no. Like there
Oh,
wasn't playtime, there wasn't anything like that.
wow.
Okay.
At 6 years old, no more play.
Was that
Yeah.
an age thing or did something happen? Was there a catalyst at 6?
Yeah, something happened. So I went they basically created a little boarding school, so to speak, up near the Scientology's international base that was about 15 minutes away. It was at the back of an Indian reservation and it's a couple acres and that became like the place where the children of all the people who worked there stayed.
Okay.
And so I was brought there. I was one of the first kids there. Yeah, that's sort of when it changed.
Okay, and that was where, like, you would live there full time, like, boarding school style. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, so, like, I lived in a dorm with 7 other girls, and it was connected by a bathroom to a dorm with 7 other girls.
Oh, wow.
And we were there all week, except on Saturday evening. We could, like, have transportation to our parents' apartment. My parents would usually come home at, like, midnight and usually, like, wake up at 9 a.m., and then by basically 11:30 a.m., we were headed back to the ranch. So it was really just, like, a few hours.
Wow.
Jeez, and that was the only time you saw your parents at that age.
Yeah, with the exception of, like, Christmas, there was a day off, and then there was Sea Org Day, there was a day off. But
Hmm.
yeah, outside of that, like, or some rare occasions, like sometimes the kids would be used as like a workforce at the international base where we would like help make food in the galley, or for a little bit we were used to make Scientology's e-meters, their lie detector machines. So we were like used as a workforce for that. So sometimes I would see like my parents during that time, but it wasn't like family time. It was like, oh hey, hugs, that sort of thing.
Wow.
Gotcha, wow. How long were you there at that boarding school?
I was there until I was 12.
So from 6 to 12,
Mhm.
and you were saying before, so that was that the only schooling, or did you get to go to another school, or was, like, all of your schooling there as well? Like, w did you have a regular education during that time?
So at the ranch, we basically did manual labor and jobs until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, we had like breakfast and lunch in that time, but we basically did like rock hauling, planting trees. We basically like, it was like a farm. We planted vegetables, we harvested vegetables, sent them to the international base so that so that they could eat those vegetables.
Yeah.
And so we were basically like a workforce, and then after lunch we did schooling, but there were like about 80 to 100 kids at the ranch, and we were like the age ranges were from like 5 years old to like 17 years old, and we didn't have grades. We were all in the same classroom,
Oh.
and there wasn't a teacher who taught us. We basically had what were called check sheets, which were basically checklists, and we each had our own individual program that we had to follow. That was like, you do this course, like, so, and we just basically followed the steps. It was like, read this, write an essay about this, and it was run like a Scientology classroom. And that's what we did. It was just self led. So there's no grades, there's no diplomas. At the end of each course, we did have to take an exam.
Mm.
And yeah, we basically did that until dinner time. So it was just like maybe like 4 hours a day. There was like a little break for like 15 minutes. And then there was like a little break where we did like 45 minutes of PE. And then after dinner, we did Scientology studies. And we studied basically from 7 until 9 o'clock. And then we would go back to our rooms, and then like lights out was at 9:30.
Wow.
Wow,
That's a
so
very good layout of the day. Thank you for laying that out like that. That's
yeah, so
Yeah.
strict, right? Like, very
so strict. And
specific?
I'm just thinking you got a bunch of 17-year-olds and then a
Mhm.
bunch of all the way down to 5-year-olds
Mhm.
walking into this one room and just working on your checklist. I mean,
Right.
did the older kids kind of help the younger kids, or was everyone in their own little world?
So you're not allowed to speak to each other during this time. And
Oh
if you
my.
did, you would get screamed at by the teacher who was called the supervisor. Basically, in Scientology, they believe that you basically have to read the thing you're reading. And if you don't understand it, it's because there's a word in it you don't understand. So you can raise your hand to ask for help from the supervisor, but they're basically a robot who says, okay, what part don't you understand? Okay, good. Is there a word there you don't understand?
Hmm.
Hmm.
And then they will say, like, okay, when was the last place you understood your materials? Okay, good. What word there didn't you understand? And if you can't find it, they'll say, okay, well, what does this word mean? And if you if you have a hesitation in answering the question, or if you give a wrong definition, then you look up that word in the dictionary. You look up, you read each of the definitions, you use each definition in sentences, and then you look up the etymology of the word, and then you either now understand what your text says, or you friggin' pretend like you understand what the text says, and you learn not to ask more questions, and it's sort of self-led in that way. So there wasn't any help or explaining things. Explaining things is like strictly forbidden in Scientology.
Wow.
Wow, that's wild.
So you said there were people up to 17 years old, but you said that you were there until you were 12?
Right. Yes.
So why did you leave early, if that makes sense?
Well, basically, we had a curriculum that we were supposed to finish. And then once you finished it, then you were allowed to graduate.
Hmm.
But like the people who were there till they were 17, they kind of arrived at a much older age. Like I got there when I was 6. They
Hmm.
probably got there when they were 15. And then like other kids got there when they were like 4 or 5. But you know how I said I saw my parents once a week?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, the truth is that I mostly just saw my dad. For the vast majority of that time, my mom was on other projects. So before she was working at the cruise ship, well, then later it was her job to build the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles. And then next it became her job, so basically I didn't see her when she was there. I only saw her like every 6 months. And then
Oh.
later her job was to go to Clearwater, Florida and build a building on that base there and run that base. So she would be there for years at a time, and she might come back for Christmas or like maybe like 3 times a year, and I would see her on those times. But other than that, it was just my dad who would see me. And so I had briefly during that time, actually for a few months at one point, she had brought me out to Clearwater, Florida to visit her. And so at the ranch, we were basically like digging trenches and like doing all this heavy manual labor half the day. I mean, all of Saturday evening, we would that was also dedicated to white glove cleaning all of the premises at the ranch, where we would stay up until 10 o'clock at night and we'd clean every room at the ranch until it passed a white glove inspection. So, like, we were basically like living in the military. We all stood in lines, we saluted, we were in units, and basically, like, we had uniform inspections every day, we had dorm inspections every day. And so,
Gee.
when I went to visit my mom at this base, she like had this apartment that like had a jacuzzi tub and these like nice soft, like I had my own room, and all I had to do was do a Scientology course during the day. And like there was like a special chef that like made our food. Like they made the most amazing delicious food I'd ever had. And
Wow.
like after dinner I could go out to like where my mom's house was, and I mean I would help do her laundry or help clean the room and stuff, but that was like way funner than what I did at the ranch in my opinion.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then like they would like she would get snacks delivered to her at night, like chocolate covered strawberries or straw fruit, and I was like, this is amazing. She would get woken up in the morning, and like one day of the week, like she would get her nails done, or we would sometimes go on outings, or if my uncle was in town, we would like watch movies, and that just wasn't how my life was at the ranch. I was like, holy shit, how do I become a Scientology executive so that
Yeah.
I can live this life?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So was this common for people that worked with your mom as well, or was this just special privileges for her for some reason?
Well, it was common for really high level senior executives in Scientology, which is what my mom was, and it was common
Hmm.
for my uncle. But it wasn't common for anyone else.
I see.
So there was like a circle that was common for, but just yeah, not common for anyone else. And so because I had had that experience, when I went back to the ranch, they had sort of made this rule that before we graduated from the ranch, we had to become a certain class level of auditor, counselor
Okay.
for Scientology, which learning to be a counselor is like really hard. It takes years. It's like very specific. You have to like, the standards are rigorous. And I basically had asked, I was like, well, can I go do this in Clearwater, Florida?
Hmm.
And they were like, okay, yeah, I guess. But then I guess I thought that my mom was going to be there. I thought I was going to have this wonderful life there,
Hmm.
how it was before.
Yeah.
And that is not what happened at all. They were like, nope, you're in the Sea Org now. Here's your uniform. Here's your dorm where you're going to live with all of these other like women. And I was like now 3,000 miles away from my parents. This was like the first time in like my entire childhood that my mom was actually at the int base. And now I was moved away
Hmm.
3,000 miles away to Clearwater, Florida. And yeah, they were just like, surprise, now you're going to do your training, but you're going to do it as a Sea Org member.
You were 12?
Yeah, I was 12. And I wound up being there until I was 16.
Oh my word.
So hold on a second. So your mom was living in Clearwater, Florida,
Hmm.
but then she moved away when you moved there?
Well, she had moved back to the international base, like, but only like a few months before I moved to Clearwater.
Okay.
Oh my
Yeah, so I
word.
guess I thought that I was gonna do some training for, like, a couple of months and that my mom would, like, be visiting back and forth, but,
Hmm.
yeah, that's not what wound up happening at all.
Well, and that's it's understandable. You had that wonderful experience in
Yeah.
Florida versus
Yeah,
what you were experiencing at the other location. Like, I can see why you'd want to go back to that location. That was where all the good was happening.
Yeah.
totally, yeah, and as it turned out, I mean, I saw my mom only 2 times for pretty much 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes one time. And then another time I did spend several hours with her until I was 18, and that's it.
Phew.
Oh my gosh. Did your mom ever say how that impacted her? Like whether or not that was super hard on her. She felt like she was making this big sacrifice, but it was worth it because she, like, you know what I mean? Like, did she ever give
Mhm.
any hint at her mental space during that time?
Um, yes, although I guess sometimes it changes, but like, I have letters from her at the time that are like, mostly from before I was 12, that are like, I'm sorry, honey, I hate to break this to you, but I'm going to have to be here longer. I have to work and I wish more than anything I could see you. But I guess like after we got out of Scientology, my parents have said like that's going back into the Sierra was the biggest mistake they ever made. And I
Mm.
guess like, I don't know, sometimes I feel like when you get out of Scientology, when you're older, it's kind of a little bit harder to come to terms with everything. So I think my mom regrets it, but then also she spent a lot of time in the Sea Org as a kid, and it was very similar for her, but she seemed to like it, or she says that, but I don't know. She was a kid, so yeah, yeah,
Okay, so it was also just like what she knew. So if she had that experience as a child, then it made sense for her child to have a similar experience because that's like all that had ever been known, you think?
yes, yeah, but it still did seem to affect my dad differently because my dad was like, even when I was in Florida, he was really pissed off that I was there. He was always trying to get me back. He would like write me like 100 letters a week, where I was like,
Mhm.
not really 100, but he would write me all the time, and he
Oh,
was constantly, like, trying to send me calling cards to get me to call him,
Mm.
and the truth is that, like, my mom had gotten into trouble during that time where she wasn't allowed to call me, and then eventually I was forbidden to call either of my parents, so it's just, like, a whole thing.
oh
Wow. Well,
wow.
I do want to get into that, but before we do, you mentioned that there was just a few times that you were able to see your mom, and there was one specific time you mentioned that you saw her for a few hours.
Right, yeah.
During that time, what did you talk about?
Well, that is kind of a big jump ahead only because that was when I was 17, and that was when my parents had already left Scientology, and had then been moved back to LA,
Oh.
and they kind of let my parents had basically threatened Scientology to let them spend time with me. And so at that time it was kind of like a whole different, like, we were just like they say in Scientology, fair roads, fair weather. And it's basically like to not make problems, not make legal issues or not make problems. So we had like gone shopping that day and we didn't really talk about anything tough.
Okay.
We just had a good
Gotcha.
day together at that time.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were jumping far ahead
No,
that
no,
way.
I
there's no way for you to know.
I did have another question from that age of, 12 to 16 or 18ish.
Mhm.
During that time, did you ever have any doubts about Scientology? Like whether it was true or whether you wanted to be in the Sea Org?
Right. Yeah. So I did, but it was probably about when I was 14 and just so many things had happened. So soon after I got to Florida, after a few months, I would like try to call my mom and basically I couldn't get a hold of her. I would
Mm,
call and they'd be like, "You need to stop calling your mom." Even my dad said I needed to stop calling her. And I was like, "What's going on? This is like, where's my mom?" And I like, there was only internal phones there. So you had to have like a phone code in order to call out. And
Hmm.
like, I would have to like almost like steal someone's, like sneak into someone's room in order to use like the executives who had a landline in order to call my mom. And I was told not to call her. And then basically, even my dad said, don't call her. And then I wound up getting pulled into an interrogation and I didn't really know why. And it's basically where they start asking you if you've done bad things using the e-meter. And this happened for a few weeks. And basically, I wouldn't stop asking questions about where my mom was or being upset about it. So they decided to bring me back to the int base. Ironically, I went with Claire Headley at that
Oh, wow.
time.
oh,
Yeah,
wow.
she, basically I met my dad there, and he basically told me that my mom had been assigned to Scientology's RPF, which is short for Rehabilitation Project Force, and it's
Ugh.
basically like when you're in deep poopy in the Sea Org, like, you're like you have to wear all black, you cannot speak unless spoken to, you spend 5 hours a day getting interrogations, but it's like a special in-depth kind of interrogation where they find your evil purposes. The rest of the time you do heavy manual labor and basically usually people are on it for years. And she got assigned to this because she basically had had an affair with a guy and that violates Scientology's like policy. It's like one of the
Mhm.
worst things you can do.
Hmm.
It's like they're okay with splitting up families and like slave labor, but if you have an affair, that's like the end of the world. Um, so she had gotten assigned to that, and my dad basically told me, and my aunt Shelly told me, and then I was basically informed of that, and then I went back. I was sent back to Clearwater, and I was basically that was why I couldn't talk to my mom.
Okay.
Mm.
So what she was assigned to is different than the infamous hole that we've been told about.
Right. Yeah. So the RPF is like an official thing that all Scientologists kind of know about, Sea Org members know about it. The whole is basically a non-standard thing in Scientology that my uncle made up. And like,
Hmm.
yeah, so that's not like procedural. That's just like his
Okay.
own personal hell that he made up on his
Oh,
own.
wow.
Interesting.
Okay. So you find out that you're not allowed to contact your mom anymore because she's off doing that, which is also crazy that even someone as high and as powerful in Scientology as your mom, right? Her being a top executive. So they
Mhm.
didn't care if they were at the top, they'd still send them to the rehabilitation camps.
For sure. Yeah. And then as my Aunt Shelley would tell me repeatedly, it's like she said that, your mom should have been assigned to the RPF earlier because when my mom and dad first got together, I guess they were married to other people. They were 19. Like, and so in the Sea Org, you can't get married. You can't, sorry, you can't have sex unless you're married. And you
Hmm.
Mm.
can't like do anything beyond kissing. Like, you can't touch anybody anywhere. Literally, like, if somebody like touches a boob, RPF.
Sound
and like
familiar?
I was
it's
like,
weird.
yeah, that checks. And
That's the way it is in Mormonism as well. You're not supposed to no
no.
touchy until you're married.
And if you do, then you have to confess, and then it will like postpone, like you're not allowed to get married in the temple, and then which comes with like
Oh,
a lot of guilt and shame because then all the community
yeah.
members, if you're gonna get married and you're not getting married in the temple, then everyone assumes it's like, oh, it's because you sinned, it's because you made a
Oh, so
mistake.
everyone knows.
So then everybody knows if you're not getting married in the temple, it's because you made mistakes with each other beforehand. And it's like
Mhm.
it's a big shameful thing. But you
Wow.
have to confess when something does happen, because if you've confessed and repented properly, then you could still get married in the temple if it's been a long enough repentance process. So, like, if you were to have premarital sex, you have to wait a whole year before you can go back into the temple, and
Oh.
you have to go through a whole repentance process and confessions with the bishop.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Oh.
yeah, it sounds very familiar. I mean, you're not going in, it's more of a, you're not obviously going to like a camp
Yeah.
per se, right? But it's very like emotionally and mentally exhaustive. And then you also like, there is that element of shame because like when you're in church, you can't take the sacrament and everybody can see who's taking and who's not taking.
Oh.
So
Very
there's a lot of
public. Yeah.
Oh.
public shaming with it, right?
Mentally, you're
Wow.
wearing all black.
Yeah, mentally you're wearing, yeah, or
Right.
big A. Like you might as well just
Yeah.
stick the big A on and be like, "Oh, they're not worthy."
Scarlet
And
letter.
yeah, exactly. So it's all
Wow.
like within the community versus like going off and doing manual labor. Although I'd say that there's probably a lot of people who have gone through that process who would rather like go to a camp and be hidden away and
Just
like
hide.
and go hide and work manual labor over like having to be in your community being shamed. But
Totally. That's
yeah.
so funny. Like I've never knew that. I never that's literally the same thing and it's also like sex shaming.
Oh yeah,
In a
yeah.
way, for
Well,
sure.
and when you
Yeah.
said like it's the worst thing that you could possibly do, in the LDS church you're taught that like having an affair or even having premarital sex, it's a sin next to murder.
Mhm.
So there's
Wow.
murder and then there's adultery, which also adultery is also considered premarital sex, not just affairs, but yep,
Right.
right
Yeah.
under
Okay.
murder in sins. So
Yeah,
That's
it's pretty.
so fun. That like that's how it is in Scientology too. It's like the worst thing you can do, even if it's not hurting anybody. It just messes with your sense of morality.
oh yeah.
Oh, yes. And, there's so many similarities between, even though Scientology, well, they claim to be a religion now, but they're very non-religious-y
Religious.
Right. Yeah.
compared, but there's so many similarities in the way that these groups choose to control their followers. And there seems to be that they have found out the way to control people and they're all kind of using it. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying every religion out there does that. I'm just saying these high demand groups do this in a certain way to keep people in line, I guess.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, and, like, sort of when people have shame, they sort of use that to their advantage.
Oh,
Like, they
yeah.
Oh,
use that shame in order to control them.
yeah.
Hmm.
So question, did Sea Org members who wanted to canoodle, did
Mhm.
they get married very quickly since they couldn't do anything more than kissing?
Okay, that happens in Mormonism too. Okay, so, yeah, people would get married, some people get married as young as 14,
Oh,
16. I got
Wow.
married when I was 18, but I got married, like, later than some people do.
phew,
Oh, wow.
14. That's not
Yeah,
even legal.
I know, yeah.
I think some states it's as young as 14 as long as both parents sign off on it
I didn't know that. I thought it
and
was
agree to it.
16.
They've changed laws since, but like back in the day, it was as young as 14
Okay.
Right.
in some states.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember there was something where some people would go to Vegas because in California they like needed you to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist before you if you're getting married too young and Scientology's like avidly against psychology and psychiatry, so people would just
Mm.
go to Vegas.
I
That's
mean,
so
if
funny they're against it. And yet they have their
since
e-meters and they're like,
exactly,
they just don't want anyone else to pay someone else for it. They're like,
it's their
it's
Exactly.
competition. It's their competition, direct competition. That's why, yeah.
oh
That's
But
my.
right.
that's
Oh,
so
Yeah.
interesting, though.
that they would rush into that.
Yeah. Speaking of having an affair, sorry, that sounded bad, but your parents, from what
Mhm.
I'm hearing here, like
Mhm.
did they ever see each other?
I was just gonna say, I'm like, how could you even have a marriage, like a functioning marriage
Yeah.
in the circumstances that you're explaining?
Right, totally. And the answer is you can't. They hardly saw each other. And the truth is that even if you are together most of the time in Scientology, it's like, who are you marrying? I was marrying someone who did the same thing as me every day, who had the same schedule, who believed that Scientology was their one purpose. It's like you're all kind of the same,
Mhm.
So you're all just believing in the exact same thing, doing the same thing every day, going to dedicate your life. You don't even know necessarily if you're in the outside world, if you would have anything in common. And your allegiance is to Scientology. Like if your spouse does something wrong in Scientology, you're required to report them. And you are brainwashed to believe that if you don't, you're hurting them.
That's
Wow.
yeah, that's
Once
very
again, sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Really?
especially within the I'd say even more in the
Oh,
FLDS.
way more in the
Way more in the
FLDS.
FLDS.
Yes.
In
Mm.
the LDS, I will say that the similarity is that the number one priority in picking a partner for life
Mhm.
is that they believe the same, that they're like as a young woman, I was taught
Yeah.
from especially from age 12 to 18 that the most important thing is to marry a returned missionary that is an honorable priesthood holder. And if he's
Mhm.
a worthy priesthood holder, then basically the rest of life will work out because as long as you're marrying somebody who has the same values and is strong in the church,
Mhm.
then your marriage can withstand anything because that's the most important, right?
I'm so curious, Jana. Do you understand what a priesthood holder is?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I guess in my mind, I'm just like, this is like somebody who has an important status. No, I don't though actually know what it is. What is
Because
it?
Okay. Yeah, I just
we
realized.
throw these terms out like nothing, just like you do with
Yeah.
Scientology terms, assuming that everybody knows what we're talking about.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
basically, a priesthood holder, first of all, is male because only man can hold the
Oh,
priesthood,
Yeah.
and it
okay.
is literally the power of God given to man on earth in order to act in His name. So basically, in order to be worthy of holding that priesthood, you have to be obeying all the rules within the church.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So some men get it and some men don't?
Yep.
Yes. Yep. And then
Oh.
when they use the term, they use a lot of the time they use the term like a worthy priesthood holder.
Mhm.
Because let's say you get some men, again, men get certain, there's different levels of priesthood. So they start getting priesthood at the age of 12, and then they move
Oh.
on at 14. So it's different levels of priesthood. And then they get the highest
Oh.
level when they're 16. Was Melchizedek at 16?
Wait a minute.
No,
I think
Melchizedek
18. 18 is when they
18.
get Melchizedek.
And that's the
Okay.
highest level, but they have to remain worthy of that priesthood. So let's say they were to fool around with their girlfriend. Part of that
Mhm.
is that
Yeah.
they're not worthy of that priesthood until they're fully done
Oh.
with their repentance process. So, as a young woman, you're told that you need to find a worthy priesthood holder, meaning there's someone who honors the fact that they have the power of God on earth
Mm,
to do
Mm.
his will. And that's like a
Oh.
super important thing that you're taught about, like looking for a partner
marriage.
to
Yeah.
begin with and
Yeah.
a marriage.
Oh, okay, that makes so much sense. So, but if they mess up, they can like repent, but they have to go through the process of like a year, but they can get it back. They just,
Yes. Yep. There is their repentance and they can't get it back. But in the FLDS, so that's in like the mainstream LDS, like that's still very important, right? And like you
yeah.
said, a lot of times, and you see people getting divorced when they get married young in the LDS because they think a lot of them, at times you're told, like, oh, well, if I find a returned missionary who's a worthy priesthood holder, then like life's going to be great. And then there's all those other differences that you're talking about, like, okay, but all these other things have to align or you can't
Right.
just get married because you want to do the deed. Like there's more to marriage than
Right.
that, but you can't do
It's
anything until you get
true.
married.
But
And
in LDS, there would be more to marriage than that because your kids still go to school and you're still in a home with that person, but in the Sea Org, you're not. So there
Mhm.
yeah,
literally is nothing more to marriage than that,
then
really.
that. Oh my
There's
gosh,
no
yeah.
partnership, there's no going and doing other things anywhere else. There's nothing. It's
But then it's also discouraged to have kids within the Sea Org, right?
well, it's not discouraged, it's forbidden. Like, so if you become pregnant, you have to either get an abortion or you get kicked out of the Sea Org.
I'm just
Wow.
surprised they haven't put a kibosh on marriage altogether at this point.
Well, they kind of really So like how you're saying the person has to be in good standing and their priesthood and stuff, like most Sea Org members, their goal is eventually to work at the international base. But
Mhm.
you have to have like certain ethical standards and production records and even certain test scores in order to work there. And
Oh,
so
wow.
like when I'm looking for a husband, I have to look for somebody who would qualify for that base.
Qualify. Ooh, I
Gotcha.
do not like that word.
I
Yeah.
know it's funny because you guys have like the more spiritual words with it, and we have like more of the, I don't know,
Yeah.
like,
Because what's the difference between qualify and worthy,
No, that's the thing, though, is that
right?
Warren Jeffs, the
mhm,
prophet of the FLDS
Mm,
church, would use
right.
that word all the time. He would say, qualify for Zion,
oh,
qualify for
Mhm.
this, be worthy of this. But he would use the word qualify. So when someone
wow.
says
Oh.
qualify, I'm like, it just, trigger, trigger.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
No,
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't realize that it would be triggering until this very moment. It normally doesn't trigger me that way, but I guess after everything we've been talking
talking
about
about in this
in this
context.
context, it just felt weird. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and it really is the same thing. Like it's really the same procedure just with a different, like I guess we have more secular terms in
yeah.
your guys's, yeah. And so the other thing was that like if you're at a certain level in the Sea Org, you like especially at the end, you couldn't marry somebody who was at a lower level.
Mm.
And actually some people like they that was first allowed and then they're forced to divorce them.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
my gosh.
Yeah, so I think that they see marriage, love, that sort of thing as a threat to your allegiance to Scientology.
Wow.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
that takes being equally yoked to a whole new. There's the
Oh yeah.
terminology in Mormonism is
Mm.
to be equally yoked, right?
Oh,
You
okay.
don't wanna if you, it sounds weird to say they compare you to oxen, but, like, if you have 2 oxen and you're putting on, like, the big yokes, right, where they connect, and they're like, if
Mhm.
one is stronger spiritually than the other, they're gonna be
Mhm.
dragging that
Mm,
person, and so they would use the
Mhm.
term that when you're finding a partner, you need to be equally yoked so that you can, like, carry forward equally.
mm.
So it just reminded me
Mhm.
of that, like not being able to be on different levels, right? Because
Yeah.
that's gonna tear you down. And there were even church leaders who had talks about how important it was that like if someone wasn't gonna have the proper standards or like live up to all of the standards the way that you were, that you should break up with them and how
Yeah,
important that
that's
was.
true.
So not
Yep, same. Mhm.
and like when my dad left the church, my mom was advised that, divorce was an option. And luckily she
Wow.
didn't go through with that, but like it's definitely not having someone be on the same spiritual page with you is definitely a reason to separate
And
families.
beyond that, just because of the way that we were taught growing up and within the church, it's
Mhm.
almost hard to stay with someone that isn't as spiritual in our terms,
Yeah.
isn't as
Or
strong in the
or as, or
church
as qualified.
as qualified, because if they choose to leave, then you can't look at them the same. You
Mm,
look at them as a
Mhm.
lesser person because of the way that we were raised.
yeah, it's
So
true.
there's all of this conflict within marriages when they're not equally yoked.
It's so true. Yes, yeah, and in Scientology, like, if you're in a higher level or in the Sea Org, if you're in a higher level group and your person is in, like, a lower level group, it's like there's certain things you can't tell them that are secretive, so it's like it's interesting how it all revolves around shame of, like, shaming the person who has not been as good or who's not as involved or isn't as qualified,
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
and yeah, how that's sort of like and how that person would be seen as like a threat to Scientology and maybe would make it more likely for you to leave or to get into your mind with their bad behavior. So you have to like keep separated out. It's built in. The separation is built in.
That's how Warren Jeffs was.
Yep.
He started like where there was order members, so those members were more faithful and they'd get baptized, and they weren't, and whole families like weren't allowed to talk to like their young children, like talk to their kids, like oh if
Wow.
their kid wasn't worthy, and they were, because like you said, all the secrecy of the things that they're allowed to know but you're not allowed to know.
And the
And
Oh,
secrets were so stupid.
yeah.
That's what
yeah,
I found
exactly.
out. I was
So
always
dumb.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm obviously hurt because I was never in on the secrets. But then later I found out about the secrets,
Were
and
you bad?
I'm like, "Bleh, those are not even that. Why was that even kept from me? That's not even interesting, you know."
You're like,
But
that wasn't worth being good for.
yeah, exactly. I was
Exactly.
trying so hard to be good enough to get in on the secrets, and then when I found out what the secrets were in a roundabout way, because I was that curious, it was just like, oh, all that for this? Come on.
Not worth
But
it.
but it's all the leader's way of keeping the control, right? Of
Yeah.
like, you have
Mhm.
something that no one else has. It's very special. And if you get rid of it, you're going to be so much worse off than what anyone else would, because you have more light or truth or whatever. You have more of it than all these other people. And like you
Mhm.
said, as soon as you can create that separation, not, between people, but especially between families, like between
Yeah.
spouses or parents and children,
Yeah.
the separation and destruction of families seems to
Mhm.
be such a consistent thing throughout all different cults,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
it's just
Mhm.
so sad to see the same tactic, because then they depend more on the organization. If you can separate them from their families and isolate them, you can control.
Yes, yeah, you're right. And you know what? Like when as you were just saying that, I just kind of realized that the thing is that recently I was asked this question on a potential show that I was going to go on. It was like, who has more power, the cult leader or the followers? And my answer was the followers, but that's why they separate people. That's why they keep people apart. It's like
Yeah.
that power is a threat. And that power is only stronger when people are together of the same mind. And that so
Yeah.
that's the biggest threat to their power.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. Jenna, I don't know if you already answered this question. Do you have siblings?
So I have two half brothers. They're twins. They're 8 years older than me. But since I never grew up in a home with my parents, I also never grew up in a home with my brothers.
Mhm.
And so we spent
Mm,
most of our time apart. And
I see.
so I guess it's they're still my half brothers, but it's not like there's not like that closeness.
That
I see.
sibling relationship.
The reason I was curious about that is because my question was going to be, out of your family, who was the first one to openly admit to a doubt or a question or a concern about the organization?
So it was my brother, but I wasn't even really aware that he was doubting until he left. Like it was just
Mhm.
kept like, oh, so in Scientology, if you want to leave, if you tell someone you want to leave other than the one person you're allowed to tell, it's considered a high crime and a suppressive act, and you can
Mm,
be declared a suppressive person where basically you get cut off.
jeez.
So even when I left Scientology, I had this what they call a committee of evidence. It's written down on a piece of paper. And one of my high crimes is that I told my husband that I wanted to leave staff. So it's
Mm,
like even if he's a kid and he told his parents he wanted to leave, high crime, excommunicated. So yeah, that's sort of how they keep that under wraps. But he was the first one, but I didn't really talk to him about it. Like I think it was going on for years and years before he actually wound up leaving. But I only found out after the fact.
That he had left.
so
Wow.
Well, I knew he'd left, but I didn't actually know that he had wanted to leave and said that for many years before that.
I see. Okay. So I'm curious, when you told your husband that you wanted to
Mhm,
leave or
mhm.
that you wanted to step down, is that what you said?
No, I wanted to leave. Yeah. I wanted to leave Scientology. Yeah. And the Sea Org.
Did he tell on you? Because I hear that's common.
I did tell on myself, but basically he said he wanted to leave with me and that he would,
Mm,
and that I had to go through their procedures in order to leave because he kind of only wanted to leave the Sea Org and not Scientology
mm,
because his parents and his brother and sister were all Scientologists. And
Mhm.
so if he left Scientology, then he would never be able to speak to them again. So he was risking losing everything. I had nothing to lose. And so he wanted us to go through the proper procedures to leave so that he could still be in touch with them. And so he wanted to leave too, but then by that time I had received so much interrogation, put up with so much that I was like, I can't go through another interrogation.
Hmm.
Mm.
Is that sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna ask, you said you had nothing to lose at that point, and you had mentioned before that at 17, you had had a conversation with your parents and they had already left. How old were you when your parents decided to leave Scientology?
So I was 16 years old, and just like one day I was plucked out of my duties. At that time, I was like working in their hotels, making sure rooms got cleaned and a bunch of stuff like that. And by the way, the whole time I was in Florida, we only went to school one day a week, and it was the same kind of school that we were talking about. But
Mm.
yeah, so I was and then I started getting interrogated by the senior most official on the base. I'd already had many interrogations, but basically they put you in a room with the e-meter, they ask you questions. If you say, like, they ask you, have you done this bad thing? If you say no, but the e-meter says yes, you got to come up with an answer if you ever want to leave that room. So I would be in this room for like 5, 9 hours every day. And
Jeez.
the time when I wasn't in that room, I was made to clean bathrooms all day while somebody stood there and watched me and made sure I didn't escape. And they also like sat outside my dorm room door in the evening to make sure I didn't escape.
Oh
Jeez.
my word.
So I was told that the reason why I had to stay in the bathroom all the time was in case my uncle Dave walked by and he had to see me and I was so terrible that it would be upsetting to him. And so I even like ate meals sometimes in the bathroom. And so basically, after going through a few months of this, I wasn't allowed to talk to any of my friends. I was under full time watch and I had no idea what was happening. They were like, okay, we're going to bring you back home. And at that point, I was like, what even is home? Like, but apparently, I thought it meant the international base where I had grown up. But basically, it was LA. They brought me to like the 12th floor of this building, and basically, two Scientology officials told me that my parents had left the Sea Org and they were now in Mexico and that I was supposed to go with them. And I was like, I guess the last many years of my life, I had sort of made do with not having my parents. I mean, did I really have them before that? No, not really.
Mhm.
And so my friends were what I considered to be my family. My parents were strangers, not strangers, but it was like, huh? Like, and
Yeah.
then they were being sent to Mexico. They had basically sent them there so that journalists wouldn't get, because my dad, like his brother's the leader of Scientology, they didn't want journalists to like get a hold of this story. And so they had set them up with jobs and stuff like that, but immediately my parents had to like support themselves right off the bat. And so in Scientology we were taught that in regular schools that they're basically filled with psychologists and psychiatrists. And like as far as what I knew about psychiatrists and psychologists, they basically gave you lobotomies with ice picks. This is like what they taught us. And
Oh
they
my
gave you
gosh.
drugs that like killed you. Like we would see these displays, like they would say, like they would show all these Hollywood stars that like drugs killed that psychiatrist gave to them. And so I was like, so the idea of going to a regular school, which by the way, my entire life I had never been around non-Scientologists. We called them wogs. And basically like I was afraid of them because for some reason we were always told, okay, like if you talk to a wog and they ask you what you do, say that you're a student. And it was called the shore story, which is basically a term from when Scientology was on the ship and what you would tell people on the shore. And
Hmm.
so we were supposed to say that we were students, which I had no idea why we were supposed to lie. I really didn't understand. I was really like proud to be a Scientologist. I didn't know what the problem was. And so I was just like afraid of them
Mm.
because I was like, I have to lie, but I don't really, what if they start like quizzing me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, if that's all you've ever known, I can see there being that fear.
yes, yeah, exactly. And like, who knows? They could be like psychiatrists or psychologists. There's like just so much paranoia in Scientology. So I was like, I'm supposed to go to Mexico. I don't even speak Spanish in the regular world with wogs with
Oh,
my parents who are kind of strangers where the psychiatrists are. I was like, no, I want to stay.
yeah.
And so basically I said I wanted to stay, and my parents like weren't happy, but they had both basically done, they were in the Sea Org when they were my age as well. And so they were upset. And Scientology, the people who I was talking to, ironically at that time it was Mike Rinder, and he was basically like, wow, you're such a dedicated Scientologist. And I think they really saw it as an opportunity to control my parents because they still had me. And so
Mm.
my parents really couldn't do anything crazy. And so, yeah, I didn't wind up leaving until I was almost 22.
Oh,
Wow. So
wow.
your parents left the Sea Org, but they weren't considered SPs.
So I remember asking, I was like, so are they SPs? And then they were basically like, no, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but are they really? And they were like, yeah,
Oh,
Okay. So they
yeah,
didn't want to declare them SPs because they didn't want them causing problems.
right. Yes. So when someone gets declared an SP, a suppressive person, basically, in order to get back in good standing, which would be in order to talk to any of your friends or other people who are in Scientology, you have to do this program where basically you have to pay your freeloader debt, like we talked about before. You got to pay back that money, and you got to do like several hundred hours of amends. And then you sort of have to ask to rejoin the group, and you're only allowed to talk to the international justice chief. So basically, they had my parents do like a mini version of that in order to be able to talk to me, even though they weren't allowed to talk to me.
It's wild.
jeez.
So from that point on, I was moved to Los Angeles. I never did any schooling after that. And for months, basically, I was lived in a room by myself, and I was kept in a room all day with a video camera on me by myself, where I was supposed to study this course. That's where you learn all about suppressive persons and all of the bad things they do to you. I actually have the packet for this course right here on my bed. Because do you want to see it?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
You don't have to. Okay, okay, I'll
No,
show
Oh,
you.
I
no, we
would
want
love
to.
to.
I'll
I
get
want to
it.
see all of it.
Okay, so like it's this course. I guess everything's backwards, but like
Oh.
these are all the policies that you have to read. It's like,
Whoa.
Why were they making you do this just because your parents were out?
so basically, because my parents are suppressive persons, like this is like, if you have a suppressive person in your life, you're called a potential trouble source, or PTS.
Oh my
Oh my
gosh.
And
God.
this course is called the PTS SP course, How to Confront and Shatter Suppression. So
Holy cow.
I don't know if you ever saw that video that Tom Cruise made, like it was shown at Scientology events, where he talks about like confronting and shatter suppression, where he's talking about this course.
Oh
Oh, I don't think I have
goodness.
seen it. Have you?
Uh-uh.
Hey, I don't think I have.
Okay. All right. I'll send you guys it after, just so you can
Yeah.
Yeah,
see what
that'd
he
be
says about it.
very interesting.
Honestly, it's very, I can't, nobody can even understand what he's saying, but he does make mention about it. So you just have to sign all these things, and then you do like you guys, like I had, like in Scientology they have like an emotional chart, which has like you have to learn the whole thing by heart verbatim. You have to learn so many things verbatim. You basically have to do these drills, which are quizzes on what everything you learn in here. They're called what do you do drills. And so I was, so like again, the senior most official on the base was doing these drills with me, and then occasionally I was getting interrogated on the e-meter. And this basically went on for months. I was isolated from everybody. I was only allowed to eat at a table with this woman. In order to go to the bathroom, I had to knock on her door and ask her to escort me downstairs because they had key card access to everything. And I was not allowed to answer the phone in case it was my parents calling. And in the Sea Org, they check all your mail. So all your mail's intercepted. So I didn't get my mail anyways, but even my mail from my friends in Clearwater was also intercepted. I never got any of that type of mail.
Think that because you were saying I want to stay
I was
and that you're showing like why are
I
they
was just
treating
gonna say
someone
that.
who's being loyal and saying I want to stay, the fact that they're treating someone who's being loyal as
Mhm.
if you're this awful person is like, what do they have to gain from that?
So in Scientology, they believe that if anything bad happens to you, basically you did something to cause it. Yeah. So like this thing with my parents, it's like The fact that that is somehow happening to me, I must have some responsibility in it. The truth is that, like, this, it's kind of like this really roundabout way of thinking about it, but what they believe is that all people are basically good, and that when something bad happens to you, you do it to yourself on purpose because you're trying to stop yourself from doing bad things. So you're sort of like handicapping yourself or disabling yourself or making yourself less powerful in order to hamper your ability to do things that you feel bad about.
Wow.
That's literally what this course is like all about.
That's
My brain
crazy.
would hurt if I read that course. Just by what you just explained is just it just it's hard to imagine how they come up with this stuff.
Now, when you're doing that course, did that make you like double down and say, okay, I'm all into Scientology. This is what I want to do? Or did it push you away where you're like, I'm being punished for something that I didn't even do? And which way did it sway you?
Well, the truth is that I had been doing courses like this since I was a little kid. This is not the hardest by any means whatsoever. I did
Wow.
so many much, much harder courses. Like, I mean, like, so when I was in Florida, I was training to become a counselor. And I mean, we would have to sit there facing someone else for 2 hours straight, not flinching, um, like doing this as a 12-year-old kid, like for 2 hours straight. I mean, people would be on this thing for months, but it was like a communication drill that we had to do. We would also have to sit there while somebody hazed us, like pointed out like our bodies, like, oh, like disgusting things, like older men, like sexually like harassing you while an entire classroom looked on. The amount of things I had to learn verbatim in Scientology, like, I could be an astronaut if I had reapplied that information. Like so many things. And so it was like extremely rigorous. And even just like learning how to use the e-meter, there's like all these drills that you have to do in order to learn it. So as far as did this turn me off, the truth is that I had read all of these policies so many times on other courses before, that I already knew all of them. I mean, when we were at the ranch at the boarding school, they have something called Chinese school that we would do first thing when we woke up in the morning, where they would take an LRH policy and they would had it written on a big scroll so that everyone could see it, and say like someone would say the first line of it, and then we would all repeat it back in unison until we were able to recite the whole thing in unison without being prompted. So that's just like part of Scientology. I mean, I wasn't really like happy at that time. I guess you asked earlier if I had had doubts, and I did have some doubts when I was like 14 or 15. And I do think that this happening with my parents added on another level of doubt, especially since they separated me from all of my friends in Clearwater, Florida. That was devastating to me. Like,
Mm.
I would cry myself to sleep every single night. Like,
Mm.
it was truly devastating. Additionally, on the very, very rare times that we got time off in Florida, my grandma lived in Florida. She was a public Scientologist. So did my aunt and a couple of my cousins. So I would like be able to like spend a few hours with her. And it was like literally the only normalcy I had. And like, even like just randomly, my grandma would like on Easter, she would like send an Easter basket to my office, like where our offices were. And it was like so funny because like, what do you think? I'm a baby? Like, it was so funny, but that's normal. But I didn't know that. And so it was like, I also like was away from my grandma. So that having happened was truly devastating. So it wasn't so much the course, but it was the isolation. And, I think that, and I'm even just now realizing this as I get older, but when I was raised living in a room with 7 other kids, attached to a room with 7 other kids, always around, like everybody, we ate in huge mess halls. I was never alone. Isolation is a big deal to me. Like,
Mm.
I had never had that in my life.
So
Wow.
during this time, did your Uncle David, aka leader of the whole thing, ever stop by and talk to you, or did you see him?
I did not see him after, well, I saw him once or twice after I was 16, but no, he never spoke to me about it. I mean, he did everything through proxies. Like, he's basically a coward. Like, he would get everybody else to do the hard work and the uncomfortable things. And if there was an opportunity to swoop in and look like the hero, then he would do that. But no, but he was directing all of this behind the scenes, but he was just doing it through other people.
Oh,
Jeez,
wow.
man, I am so sorry.
Mm.
It's one thing to talk about it because it was years ago, but if you actually imagine how hard that would be to go through all of this and try to be such a good person and all of the work you put in to being a good Scientologist and then choosing Scientology over your parents because that's how indoctrinated you were in it all. And
Mhm.
then them being like, okay, thank you. Let me slap you over the face a few times. Like it
Always.
just doesn't make any sense. It's just so
No.
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that. Bizarrely, I have, like, I feel like in regular life, I'm like totally a crier. I cry, like, I probably cry every day. I never cry when I talk about my story. I feel like this like extreme drudgery. I don't know why, but I feel like I almost feel like if I had had it differently and then had something to compare it to,
Mm,
I would feel like I might feel differently. But there's just some, for some reason, like maybe it will change someday. I do really feel like I've done a lot of looking at it. So I don't feel like it's like disconnection, but I don't know. I think that I have, since I've become a mom, that has put a lot of things in like a very, very different perspective.
mm,
And it's like if I like take my kids' little faces in my mind and put them over mine, then I'm like absolutely horrified and I actually do get quite upset about it. Like,
mm.
but it's like a weird mental trick that I have to do because this is like completely normal. It's like the only childhood I had, so I don't really know of it any other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get married at 18. You met
Mhm.
your husband in the Sea Org, right?
Yes. Yes.
What does it look like getting married in the Sea Org? Because it seems like you said before, even though you're not supposed to be having any premarital sex, people are very restricted, your time's restricted, you only have this. But everyone that we've talked to that's been in the Sea Org, they
Mhm.
all got married. So,
Right. Yeah.
right, you like at the end of the day, you can't keep men and women that close in proximity and not end up having them want relationships out of
They're
it,
still
right?
human. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's true.
but what does that look like? Like, do you guys have regular weddings? Do you have wedding receptions? Are families involved?
Vegas, baby.
It's out of
No,
coming here.
that's a great question. Yeah. So I will say that it varies because like I remember before I got married, I was like, I'm gonna get married when I was 17. And I would like think of my dress and that sort of thing. And so, when my brother got married, his wife had like a wedding dress. A lot of people got married at the Celebrity Center. There's like a gazebo there. But it's like also who's paying for this? You're only getting paid $50 a week. So usually if you have some family outside of Scientology or not outside of Scientology, but maybe they're not a Sea Org member, so they're a Scientologist, then they can like pay for your dress or pay for stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like, I'm sure that when Claire got married, she had a wedding dress. And when Aaron got married, I was actually at his wedding. So they had like a regular wedding. And so when I got married, and there's like a Scientology ceremony that gets performed by
Okay.
like a
Okay.
Scientology minister. So they have their own special ceremony where they have what's called in Scientology the ARC triangle, which is affinity, reality, and communication. And
Mm,
it's like ARC, this is a triangle, and that's supposed to lead to understanding. And then they take the two rings and they say like picture. I don't remember if they say put a triangle inside them, but they basically make you promise to never go to sleep on an upset. And yeah, so they have their own little ceremony. I forget half
Okay.
of it. Maybe that's why I'm divorced.
mm.
But so yeah, and then like you still have like a best man and bridesmaids and stuff. Just somehow people find these dresses somewhere. I really actually don't know because I didn't do that. Um So when I met my husband, or whatever, he wasn't my husband yet, but when I met him, like you kind of like, usually people get married within like a month of meeting each other, or just or dating or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like started dating, which really means when we went to our birthing at 11:30 at night, we would sit outside my dorm room and talk and like kiss, or there was a fire escape. So if you I don't know if you ever see any of the videos from like Streets LA or Jessica Palmadessa. They're outside the Hollywood Recruiting Center.
I haven't
Mm-mm.
seen
Oh,
him.
okay. Have you guys heard of Streets LA?
Uh-uh.
Nope.
Oh, okay. His name's William Good, and he like goes and protests outside of this Hollywood testing center or recruitment center where they try to
Oh.
get people into Scientology. Well, I
Oh,
lived
okay.
in that building on Hollywood Boulevard. I lived on the top floor, and just whenever I see their videos, I'm always like, "Oh, I lived there for 4 years." Um,
Wow.
and it's just like basically talking and like trying not to touch each other inappropriately and kissing. And so usually people get married like in the first few months, but basically because, I was part of this like family where every single thing I ever did reflected so much on them. There was like high
Mm.
level of security, interrogation always. Um, Dallas, because I don't really know what else to call him. It's weird in this story if I call him my ex-husband. Anyways, this dude, Dallas, he his uncle had like once looked at a bad Scientology website, an anti-Scientology website.
Ooh.
And so Scientology like wanted to do all these handlings on him, and they wound up taking a year, and like this was so out of the ordinary that they wouldn't let us get married. They really dragged it on, and then they spent so much time interrogating us and trying to find out Dallas's intentions for wanting to marry me. Was he like a secret spy trying to infiltrate our family and take over Scientology?
Oh my word.
Wow.
Asking us if we'd done anything, if we'd touch each other any which way, and in any possible way you could word the question, using an e-meter while being videotaped. This went on for a year.
Wow.
And so they were basically worried that his uncle would somehow get in touch with my parents and try to bring down Scientology. And so
Wow.
basically, if my parents were at my wedding, which they might make a stink about wanting to be there, then they had this whole like conspiracy theory. And this was when there was like a big legal case going on with Scientology with Lisa McPherson, who was a woman who died in the care of Scientology in Clearwater, Florida. And so Scientology was being sued for that. And they were just all paranoid that everything would be connected and it would all bring down Scientology. So they didn't let us get married. So we basically wound up having sex before we got married. We were in deep trouble. They tried to separate us, they took him away. And so by the time that this had happened, they had already taken away all my friends. My parents were gone. My brother was gone. I had tolerated more interrogation than anybody who I had ever known in Scientology. And they sort of took him and hid him away. And I basically was like, nope, I'm not doing what you say anymore. Like there was like a switch that went off.